Daniel Mitchell never expected that stopping a 12-year-old from stealing a candy bar would completely change his life. What started as a simple act of intervention at a grocery store checkout line led to the most unexpected marriage proposal he'd ever received. But the real story isn't about the proposal itself. It's about what happened in the weeks that followed, and how sometimes the most broken families find each other in the most unlikely places. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Daniel pushed his cart through the automatic doors of Peterson's Market, the familiar weight of exhaustion settling on his shoulders like an old coat. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that particular shade of pale yellow that made everyone look slightly sick. It was Thursday evening, which meant the store would be busy with people grabbing last-minute items before the weekend rush. Daniel preferred it this way. The crowd made him invisible, just another face among the shoppers. At 34, Daniel had mastered the art of grocery shopping with military precision. His list was organized by aisle, his route through the store calculated to avoid backtracking. Time was always short between picking up his daughter Emma from after-school care and getting home to help with homework. Tonight was no different, except for the nagging headache that had been building behind his eyes since lunch. He grabbed a cart and headed straight for the produce section. Apples for Emma's lunch, bananas because they were her current favorite, snack and carrots that would probably sit in the refrigerator until he threw them away in 2 weeks. Daniel had good intentions about vegetables, but Emma's palate remained stubbornly limited to about 6 foods she would eat without complaint. The store was busier than usual. Daniel navigated around an elderly woman comparing prices on canned soup and a mother trying to negotiate with her toddler about which cereal they could buy. These small scenes of ordinary family life used to sting back when the divorce was fresh and everything reminded him of what he'd lost. Now, 3 years later, they were just background noise. He moved through the aisles methodically. Bread from the bakery section. Emma liked the soft whole wheat kind that probably had more sugar than actual wheat. Peanut butter, the smooth kind, because she refused to eat the chunky version he preferred. Milk, orange juice, and those string cheese sticks that cost twice what regular cheese cost, but were apparently the only form of dairy she would consume. Daniel paused in the cereal aisle, studying the colorful boxes that promised to make breakfast exciting. Emma had been asking for the kind with marshmallows, and he'd been holding out for something with at least a minimal amount of nutritional value. But it had been a long week, and he was running low on battles he had the energy to fight. He grabbed the box with the cartoon leprechaun on it and added it to his cart. The frozen food section was his next stop. Frozen pizzas for nights when cooking felt impossible, which was happening more often lately. Frozen vegetables that he convinced himself counted as proper nutrition, and ice cream, because Emma had been extra patient with his mood swings this week. She deserved something special, even if it was just a rocky road from the grocery store freezer. As Daniel rounded the corner toward the checkout area, he nearly collided with another cart. He looked up to apologize and found himself face to face with a woman about his age, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and her expression harried. She wore scrubs, the kind nurses or medical assistants wore, and looked like she'd just finished a very long shift. "Sorry," she said quickly, maneuvering her cart around his. "I wasn't watching where I was going." "No problem," Daniel replied, but she was already moving away, heading toward the pharmacy section with purpose. He noticed her cart was nearly empty, just a few basic items and what looked like children's medicine. Something about her rushed manner and the tired set of her shoulders made him pause, but he shook off the impulse to offer help. People didn't appreciate strangers inserting themselves into their business. Daniel continued toward the checkout lanes, scanning for the shortest line. Most of the registers were busy, staffed by teenagers who looked as tired as he felt. He chose the lane with only 2 people ahead of him and began unloading his cart onto the conveyor belt, organizing items by category out of habit. The person in front of him was taking forever. Daniel tried not to let his impatience show as he watched the cashier, a kid who couldn't be more than 17, struggle with what appeared to be a complicated coupon situation. The customer, an older man with strong opinions about store policy, was not making the process any easier. Daniel checked his phone. He had 45 minutes before Emma's after-school program closed, which should be plenty of time if traffic cooperated. But traffic in Burlington rarely cooperated, especially on Thursday evenings when everyone seemed to be running the same errands he was. He was scrolling through his email when he noticed movement in his peripheral vision. A boy, maybe 12 or 13 years old, was standing near the magazine rack at the end of his checkout lane. The kid was thin, wearing clothes that looked clean but too big for his frame. His hair needed cutting, and he kept glancing nervously toward the pharmacy section where Daniel had seen the woman in scrubs disappear. Daniel went back to his phone, trying to clear out the accumulation of work emails that had arrived since he'd left the office. But something about the boy's behavior kept drawing his attention. The kid was fidgeting, shifting his weight from foot to foot, and his eyes kept darting between the candy display and the pharmacy area. The coupon situation at the front of the line was finally resolved, and Daniel moved up as the difficult customer gathered his bags and left. Now there was only one person ahead of him, a woman buying what looked like ingredients for a dinner party. The cashier began scanning items with practiced efficiency, and Daniel prepared to move forward. That's when he saw it. The boy's hand moved quickly, almost too quickly to follow, but Daniel caught the motion. A candy bar disappeared from the display into the kid's jacket pocket. It was done so smoothly that Daniel almost wondered if he'd imagined it. But the boy's increased. Nervousness confirmed what he'd seen. Daniel found himself in an uncomfortable position. His instinct was to mind his own business. He had enough complications in his life without getting involved in other people's problems. But the boy couldn't be more than a year or 2 older than Emma. And something about his desperate attempt at stealth struck Daniel as more sad than criminal. The woman ahead of him finished her transaction and moved away. Daniel stepped forward and began placing his items on the counter, but his attention remained split between the cashier's scanning and the boy who was now edging toward the exit. "Find everything okay today?" the cashier asked with the automatic cheerfulness of someone who'd asked the same question 1,000 times. "Yeah, thanks," Daniel replied, but his mind was elsewhere. The boy was almost at the door now, walking with forced casualness that screamed guilt to anyone paying attention. In about 30 seconds he'd be outside and gone. Daniel made a decision that surprised him. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice carrying just enough authority to make the boy freeze. "Could you come here for a second?" The boy turned, and Daniel saw real fear in his eyes. Up close, the kid looked even younger than Daniel had initially thought. His face was pale, and there was something hollow about his expression that went beyond simple hunger. "I think you might have forgotten to pay for something," Daniel said quietly, keeping his voice gentle but firm. The boy's eyes darted toward the exit, clearly calculating whether he could make it if he ran. Daniel stepped slightly to the side, not blocking the boy's path, but making it clear that he'd noticed the movement. "I don't know what you mean," the boy said, but his voice cracked. Daniel glanced at the cashier, who had stopped scanning his items and was watching the interaction with obvious uncertainty. The last thing Daniel wanted was to create a scene that would get the kid in serious trouble. "Why don't we just take care of it now?" Daniel suggested. "What was it, a candy bar?" The boy's hand moved instinctively to his jacket pocket, confirming Daniel's suspicion. For a moment they stood in silence, the boy's eyes filling with a combination of shame and defiance that made Daniel's chest tighten. "I can pay for it," Daniel said finally. "It's not a big deal. I don't need your help," the boy said. But there was no real conviction behind the words. "I know you don't," Daniel replied, "but everyone needs a break sometimes." The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out the candy bar, a simple chocolate bar that probably cost less than $2. He placed it on the counter with shaking hands, his face burning with embarrassment. "Add this to my order," Daniel told the cashier, who nodded and scanned the item without comment. The total came to $43.18. Daniel handed over his debit card and waited for the transaction to complete, acutely aware of the boy standing beside him in miserable silence. "What's your name?" Daniel asked as the receipt printed. "Tyler," the boy mumbled. "I'm Daniel. You waiting for someone, Tyler?" Tyler nodded toward the pharmacy area. "My mom. She's getting medicine." Daniel gathered his bags and stepped away from the register, but didn't move toward the exit. Something told him this interaction wasn't over yet. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You hungry?" he asked. Tyler shrugged, which Daniel interpreted as a yes. "There's a sandwich. Shop next door. You want to grab something while we wait for your mom?" Tyler looked toward the pharmacy again, clearly torn between pride and need. Daniel recognized the expression. He'd seen it in his own mirror during the worst months after his divorce, when accepting help felt like admitting defeat. "I don't have any money," Tyler said finally. "I didn't ask if you had money," Daniel replied. "I asked if you were hungry." Before Tyler could respond, a voice called out from behind them, "Tyler, Tyler, what are you doing?" Daniel turned to see the woman in scrubs approaching them, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she took in the scene. Up close, she was prettier than he'd initially realized, with tired green eyes and the kind of natural beauty that survived long shifts and constant stress. "Mom, this is Daniel," Tyler said quickly. He helped me with something." The woman's eyes moved between Daniel and her son, clearly trying to piece together what had happened. Daniel could see the moment she noticed the chocolate bar in Tyler's hand. Her face went pale, and her shoulders sagged as understanding dawned. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Tyler, you didn't." "It's okay," Daniel said quickly. "Really, it's taken care of." The woman, Tyler's mother, looked at Daniel with a mixture of gratitude and mortification that made him uncomfortable. He could see her struggling with the same pride that had made Tyler hesitate about accepting help. "I'm Rebecca," she said. "Finally, Rebecca Chen, and I'm so sorry about this. I can pay you back." "There's nothing to pay back," Daniel interrupted. "Seriously, it was a candy bar." Rebecca looked like she might cry. "You don't understand. Things have been really difficult lately, and Tyler knows better than to—" "Mom, don't," Tyler said quietly. Daniel found himself in the middle of a family moment he had no business witnessing, but there was something about both of them that made him reluctant to simply walk away. Maybe it was the way Tyler was trying to protect his mother's dignity, or the way Rebecca was fighting to hold herself together despite obvious exhaustion. "Look," Daniel said, "I was just telling Tyler. There's a sandwich shop next door. Why don't we all grab something to eat? My treat." Rebecca started to shake her head. "We couldn't possibly—" "When's the last time you ate today?" Daniel asked gently. The question caught Rebecca off guard. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it, clearly unable to remember. "That's what I thought," Daniel said. "Come on, let's get some food." He started walking toward the exit, not looking back to see if they were following. Sometimes people needed permission to accept help, and sometimes they just needed someone to make the decision for them. Daniel wasn't sure which category Rebecca and Tyler fell into, but he suspected they needed both. The sandwich shop was nearly empty, which Daniel took as a good sign. Rebecca and Tyler followed him inside, Tyler still clutching the chocolate bar like a talisman. Daniel approached the counter and studied the menu, trying to give them time to process what was happening. "What sounds good?" he asked, without turning. "Around. We really can't let you do this," Rebecca said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're not letting me do anything," Daniel replied. "I'm doing it because I want to. There's a difference." He ordered 3 sandwiches, chips and drinks, ignoring Rebecca's continued protests. When the food was ready, they found a table in the corner where the conversation couldn't be overheard by other customers. "I work at the hospital," Rebecca said suddenly, as if she needed to establish that she wasn't a charity case. "I'm a nurse, but my hours got cut last month, and Tyler's been staying with a neighbor after school because I can't afford the aftercare program anymore." Daniel nodded, understanding more than she probably realized. "It's tough when you're doing it alone." "You have kids?" Rebecca asked. "A daughter, Emma. She's 9. Daniel took a bite of his sandwich, buying time to decide how much to share. "Her mom and I divorced 3 years ago. I know what it's like to feel like you're always one step behind." Something in Rebecca's expression shifted. The defensive wall she'd been maintaining lowered slightly, and Daniel saw genuine curiosity replace the guarded politeness. "Is it always this hard?" she asked quietly. Daniel considered the question seriously. "Some days are harder than others, but it gets easier to handle, if that makes sense. You develop systems, figure out what really matters, and what you can let slide." Tyler had been silent through most of the conversation, but now he looked up from his sandwich. "Daniel stopped me from stealing," he said matter-of-factly, "but he was nice about it." Rebecca's face flushed again. "Tyler, it's okay," Tyler continued. "I was scared, but he didn't yell or call security or anything. He just paid for it and asked if I was hungry." Daniel met Rebecca's eyes across the table. "We've all been there," he said simply. "No," Rebecca said, shaking her head. "We haven't all been there. I've been working since I was 16. I put myself through nursing school. I don't take handouts. And I don't steal." The words came out sharper than she'd probably intended, and Daniel saw Tyler flinch. Rebecca noticed too, and her expression immediately softened. "I'm sorry," she said to both of them. "I'm not angry at you, Daniel. I'm angry at the situation. I'm angry that my son felt like he had to steal a candy bar, and I'm angry that I didn't even notice he was hungry." "When did you last have a day off?" Daniel asked. Rebecca laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I work 3 12-hour shifts at the hospital and pick up extra shifts when I can. On my days off, I'm either catching up on laundry and housework or taking Tyler to appointments. Last week, I worked 6 days straight because someone called in sick and they needed coverage." Daniel did the math in his head. 36 hours a week was barely full-time, and he knew hospital pay for nurses wasn't as good as people assumed. With rent, utilities, groceries, and all the other expenses of raising a child alone, Rebecca was probably living paycheck to paycheck with no margin for error. "What about Tyler's father?" Daniel asked, then immediately regretted the question when he saw Rebecca's face close off again. "Not in the picture," she said curtly, "by choice." Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and Daniel realized this was probably a frequent source of tension between mother and son. He recognized the dynamic from his own experience. Emma had gone through a phase of asking why her mother didn't want to spend more time with her, and Daniel had struggled to find ways to explain adult failings to a child's sense of fairness. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "I shouldn't have asked." "It's fine," Rebecca replied, but her tone suggested it wasn't. "Tyler's father decided he wasn't ready to be a parent when Tyler was 2. He moved to California and sends birthday cards sometimes. That's the extent of his involvement." Daniel felt a familiar anger rise in his chest. He'd never understand parents who could walk away from their children. His own relationship with Emma's mother was complicated, but Sarah at least maintained regular contact and took Emma every other weekend. The idea of simply abandoning a child was incomprehensible to him. That's his loss, Daniel said, and meant it. Tyler looked up sharply, as if he'd never heard anyone say that before. You think so? I know so, Daniel replied. Any father who would walk away from a kid like you is missing out on something incredible. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. You don't even know us. I know enough, Daniel said. I know Tyler was willing to risk getting in trouble to get something he needed. I know you're working yourself to exhaustion to take care of him. I know you're both trying to maintain your dignity in a situation that's testing every limit you have. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. The silence that followed was comfortable rather than awkward. Tyler finished his sandwich and started working on his chips, while Rebecca seemed to be processing everything that had happened in the past hour. Why did you help us? She asked finally. Daniel considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. Something about Tyler's desperate attempt at stealing had reminded him of his own moments of desperation, and something about Rebecca's fierce protectiveness of her son had touched a part of him he'd thought was closed off permanently. Because someone helped me once when I needed it, he said instead, and because Tyler reminded me of Emma at that age, trying to solve problems he shouldn't have to solve. What kind of problems was Emma trying to solve? Rebecca asked. Daniel smiled ruefully. She was convinced that if she could just be good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, her mother would come back home. She started doing things like making her own breakfast and packing her own lunch because she thought, it would make me less stressed and more likely to reconcile with Sarah. That's heartbreaking, Rebecca said softly. Kids shouldn't have to worry about adult problems, Daniel agreed, but they do anyway, and sometimes they come up with solutions that break your heart. Tyler had been listening to this conversation with obvious interest. Is your daughter okay now? She's doing better, Daniel said. It took a while for her to understand that the divorce wasn't her fault and that she couldn't fix it by being perfect. But she's a tough kid, and she's learned to adapt. Do you think I could meet her sometime? Tyler asked. The question caught Daniel off guard. He glanced at Rebecca, who looked equally surprised by her son's sudden boldness. Tyler, she said. Gently, Daniel has his own life and responsibilities. We can't just... I'd like that, Daniel said, surprising himself. Emma's always complaining that she's the only kid in her class without siblings. Maybe she'd enjoy having someone to hang out with. The offer seemed to hang in the air between them, loaded with implications none of them were quite ready to examine. Daniel found himself wondering what he was getting into, but the thought didn't alarm him as much as it should have. Rebecca was studying his face with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. You're serious, she said. Not quite a question. I'm serious, Daniel confirmed. Look, I'm not trying to solve all your problems or insert myself into your lives in any permanent way. But Tyler seems like a good kid, and Emma could use a friend. If you're open to it, maybe we could arrange something low-key, a park or something. Can we, Mom? Tyler asked, his earlier sullenness replaced by genuine excitement. Rebecca looked between Daniel and her son, clearly weighing the potential benefits against the possible complications. Daniel recognized the expression. It was the same one he wore when Emma asked to do something that seemed harmless, but could potentially lead to complications he wasn't prepared to handle. We'll see, she said finally, which Daniel interpreted as parental code for, probably yes, but I need time to think about it. They finished their meal in more comfortable conversation. Tyler peppered Daniel with questions about Emma, what grade she was in, what she liked to do, whether she played any sports. Rebecca seemed to relax as she watched her son engage with an adult who treated his questions as legitimate rather than annoying. When they finally prepared to leave, Rebecca insisted on giving Daniel her phone number so she could pay him back for the food. Daniel accepted the number, but made it clear he had no intention of accepting repayment. Thank you, Rebecca said as they stood outside the sandwich shop. "For everything. You didn't have to help us, and you certainly didn't have to feed us." "Yes, I did," Daniel replied. "Maybe not legally, but definitely morally." As Daniel drove home to pick up Emma, he found himself thinking about the encounter more than he'd expected. There had been something about Rebecca's combination of strength and vulnerability that had gotten under his skin, and Tyler's eagerness to connect with Emma suggested a loneliness that resonated with Daniel's own experience of single parenthood. He pulled into the parking lot of Emma's after-school program with 5 minutes to spare, still processing the events of the evening. When Emma emerged from the building, chattering about her day and complaining about the math homework she hadn't finished, Daniel found himself wondering how she would react to meeting Tyler and Rebecca. But as they drove home together, Emma's voice filling the car with stories about playground drama and spelling tests, Daniel realized he was looking forward to finding out. 3 days passed before Daniel heard from Rebecca. He'd been checking his phone more often than usual, telling himself it was just curiosity about whether Tyler was doing okay. When the text finally came, it was simple. "Tyler hasn't stopped talking about meeting Emma. Would Saturday afternoon work?" Daniel stared at the message for longer than necessary. It had been years since he'd arranged a social interaction that wasn't directly related to Emma's school or activities. The prospect of introducing his daughter to people who might become important in their lives felt simultaneously exciting and terrifying. He texted back, "Riverside Park at 2 p.m. There's a good playground and plenty of space." Rebecca's response came quickly. "Perfect. Thank you again for everything." Saturday morning arrived with Emma in one of her interrogation moods. She'd been asking questions about their afternoon plans since Daniel mentioned they were meeting new friends, and her curiosity had only intensified overnight. "So Tyler is 12? Emma asked for the 3rd time as Daniel made pancakes. 12. Or 13, I think," Daniel replied, flipping a pancake with more concentration than the task required. "And his mom is a nurse?" "Yes." "And you met them at the grocery store?" Daniel paused, syrup bottle in hand. He'd given Emma a simplified version of events, explaining that he'd helped Tyler with something and they'd become friends. The full story felt too complicated for a 9-year-old to process. "I helped Tyler when he was having a difficult time," Daniel said carefully. "Sometimes people need help, and if we can provide it, we should." Emma nodded solemnly. She'd inherited Daniel's tendency towards seriousness, which sometimes made her seem older than her years. "Is Tyler nice?" "I think you'll like him," Daniel said. "He asked a lot of questions about you." "What kind of questions?" "The same kind you're asking about him." Emma grinned, apparently satisfied with this answer. She attacked her pancakes with enthusiasm, while Daniel sipped his coffee and tried to manage his own nervousness about the afternoon. Riverside Park was busy when they arrived. Families had claimed picnic tables. Children ran between playground equipment, and the walking path was populated with joggers and dog walkers. Daniel spotted Rebecca and Tyler near the swing set, Rebecca sitting on a bench, while Tyler pushed himself lazily back and forth. Emma grabbed Daniel's hand as they approached, a gesture that surprised him. She hadn't done that in public for months, claiming it was too babyish. Her sudden need for reassurance reminded him that this meeting was as uncertain for her as it was for him. "Rebecca," Daniel called out as they got closer. Rebecca looked up and smiled, but Daniel noticed the tension around her eyes. She was nervous too, which somehow made him feel better. Tyler jumped off the swing and walked over with the careful casualness that 12-year-old boys used when they wanted to appear nonchalant. "Emma, this is Rebecca and Tyler," Daniel said. "Rebecca, Tyler, this is my daughter Emma." Emma stepped slightly behind Daniel, but managed a polite, "Hi." Tyler studied her with obvious curiosity. "You're smaller than I thought you'd be." "I'm not small," Emma protested. I'm average height for my age. I didn't mean it was bad, Tyler said quickly. I just thought you'd be taller because your dad is tall. Daniel watched this exchange with amusement. Children had a way of cutting through social niceties that adults spent so much energy maintaining. Within minutes, Emma and Tyler were engaged in a detailed comparison of their respective schools, teachers, and least favorite subjects. They seemed to be hitting it off, Rebecca observed, settling onto the bench beside Daniel. Emma's been excited about this all week, Daniel admitted. She doesn't get many opportunities to meet kids outside of school. Tyler either. We moved to Burlington 6 months ago, and he's still adjusting. Making friends has been challenging. Daniel wanted to ask why they'd moved, but something in Rebecca's tone suggested it wasn't a casual relocation. Instead, he watched Emma show Tyler the monkey bars, her initial shyness completely forgotten. Where did you move from? He asked finally. Portland, Rebecca said. Tyler's father lives there, and I thought maybe if we were closer, he might want to be more involved in Tyler's life. The past tense told Daniel everything he needed to know about how that had worked out. That must have been difficult, he said. Rebecca laughed bitterly. Tyler's father made it very clear that proximity wasn't the issue. He has a new family now, and Tyler doesn't fit into that picture. Moving here was probably the most expensive mistake I've ever made. Daniel understood the impulse behind Rebecca's decision, even if it hadn't worked out as she'd hoped. He'd made his own share of choices based on optimism rather than reality during the early days of his divorce. So you're stuck here now? He asked. Not stuck exactly, but starting over again feels impossible. I finally found a job at the hospital. Tyler's enrolled in school. We have an apartment. It's not ideal, but it's stable. Emma's laughter interrupted their conversation. She and Tyler had moved to the climbing structure, where Tyler was demonstrating some elaborate route to the top. Emma was attempting to follow his path, her face scrunched in concentration. She's fearless, Rebecca observed. Sometimes too fearless, Daniel replied. Last month she decided she could ride her bike down the hill behind our house without using her brakes. The scraped knees took weeks to heal. Tyler went through a phase where he thought he could parkour. Off every piece of furniture in our apartment. I spent half my salary on bandages. They fell into comfortable conversation, sharing the small disasters and victories that made up single parenthood. Daniel found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't expected. Rebecca was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor that emerged once she stopped worrying about making a good impression. After an hour on the playground, Emma and Tyler declared themselves hungry. Daniel had packed snacks, but Rebecca suggested the ice cream truck they could hear playing its tinkling melody somewhere in the park. My treat this time, Rebecca said firmly. When Daniel started to object, they found the truck near the basketball courts, surrounded by children and parents in various states of negotiation over flavors and prices. Tyler and Emma studied the illustrated menu with the seriousness of art critics, while Daniel and Rebecca waited in the growing line. Can I ask you something? Rebecca said quietly. Sure. Why are you doing this? Really? I know you said someone helped you once, but this feels like more than just paying it forward. Daniel considered the question while they moved forward in line. The honest answer was that he wasn't entirely sure himself. Something about Rebecca and Tyler had gotten under his skin in a way that surprised him. I like you, he said finally. Both of you. Emma needs friends, and so do I, apparently. It's been a while since I've had an adult conversation that wasn't work-related or about school events. Rebecca smiled. I know that feeling. Most of my conversations these days are either with patients who are in pain or with Tyler about homework and chores. They reached the front of the line, and Emma and Tyler announced their choices, elaborate sundaes that would probably spoil their dinner. Daniel started to suggest something smaller, then caught himself. Some battles aren't worth fighting, especially When the kids were getting along so well, they found a picnic table in the shade and watched Emma and Tyler attack their ice cream with enthusiasm. The conversation had shifted to lighter topics: Emma's upcoming school play, Tyler's interest in basketball, weekend plans that might include more park visits. "Mom," Tyler said suddenly, "can Daniel and Emma come to dinner sometime?" Rebecca looked startled by the question. "Tyler, that's not really—" "I'd like that," Daniel said before she could finish the polite refusal. "If you're up for it." "You don't have to say yes just because Tyler asked," Rebecca said. "I'm not. I'm saying yes because I want to." Emma looked up from her sundae, ice cream smeared across her chin. "Can we bring dessert?" "You're covered in dessert," Daniel said, gesturing to her rapidly melting ice cream. "I mean real dessert. Like a cake or something." Rebecca laughed. "You can bring whatever you want, but I should warn you, I'm not much of a cook. We might end up ordering pizza." "Emma loves pizza," Daniel said. "Don't you, Em?" Emma nodded enthusiastically, already planning what kind of cake they would bring. As the afternoon wound down, Daniel found himself reluctant to leave. Emma and Tyler had moved on from the playground to a game of catch with a frisbee someone had left behind, and their easy friendship was something he hadn't realized he'd been hoping for. "This was good," Rebecca said, echoing his thoughts. "Tyler needed this. He's been struggling with the move more than he lets on." "What about you?" Daniel asked. "How are you handling the move?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment, watching Tyler chase after an errant frisbee throw. "Some days are harder than others. Tyler's adjusting better than I am, which is probably how it should be. Kids are more resilient." "Adults are more complicated," Daniel agreed. "We have more history to carry around." "Exactly. Tyler can make a friend in an afternoon and be perfectly content. I spend the whole time wondering what the catch is, waiting for the other shoe to drop." Daniel understood that feeling intimately. His divorce had left him suspicious of good things, always waiting for them to reveal themselves as temporary or conditional. "Maybe there isn't a catch," he suggested. "Maybe sometimes good things just happen." Rebecca looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You really believe that?" "I'm trying to," Daniel admitted. "Some days I'm more successful than others." They made plans for dinner the following weekend as they prepared to leave the park. Emma and Tyler exchanged information about their favorite movies and books, already planning what they would do when they saw each other again. On the drive home, Emma chatted about Tyler and Rebecca, her excitement bubbling over in the way. It did when she'd had a particularly good day. Daniel listened with half his attention, while the other half processed his own feelings about the afternoon. "Dad," Emma said suddenly, "do you like Rebecca?" The question caught Daniel off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you like her, or just like her as a friend?" Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror at his daughter's serious expression. "Why do you ask?" "Because you were looking at her the way you look at me when I do something that makes you proud, but different." Daniel was impressed by Emma's observation skills and slightly alarmed by her perceptiveness. "Rebecca seems like a very nice person," he said carefully. "That's not what I asked. I know what you asked, and I think it's too early to know the answer to that question." Emma considered this. "But you might like her?" "I might," Daniel admitted. "How would you feel about that?" "I think it would be good," Emma said after a moment. "You're happier when you have someone to talk to besides me, and Rebecca seems sad sometimes. Maybe you could make her not sad." Daniel felt his chest tighten at his daughter's casual wisdom. "It's not that simple, Em. Adults have complicated feelings about things." "Everything's complicated when you're an adult," Emma said with a sigh that sounded far too mature for her age. "But some things are still simple too, like being nice to people and helping when someone needs help." Daniel couldn't argue with that logic. As they pulled into their driveway, He found himself looking forward to the following weekend in a way that had nothing to do with being polite or doing the right thing. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel found himself thinking about Rebecca's question at the park. Why was he doing this? The answer was becoming clearer, even if it made him uncomfortable. He was lonely, not just for adult companionship, but for the specific kind of connection that came from understanding someone else's struggles because they mirrored your own. Rebecca was fighting the same battle he'd been fighting for 3 years, trying to be enough for a child who deserved 2 parents, trying to maintain dignity while accepting that sometimes you needed help, trying to build a life that felt whole instead of broken. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Tyler had a great time today. Thank you for being so patient with his questions." Daniel typed back, "Emma hasn't stopped talking about him. I think we've created a monster. The good kind of monster, I hope. The best kind," Daniel confirmed. He stared at the phone for a moment before typing, "I had a good time too. It's been a while since I've had such easy conversation with another adult." Rebecca's response came quickly. "I know exactly what you mean. I'd forgotten what it felt like to talk about something other than work or parenting responsibilities." Daniel found himself smiling at his phone like a teenager. The realization should have embarrassed him, but instead it felt like waking up from a long sleep. "See you next weekend," he typed, looking forward to it. Daniel set his phone aside and tried to focus on the book he'd been attempting to read for the past month. But his mind kept drifting to the afternoon. Emma's laughter, Tyler's eagerness to please, Rebecca's gradual relaxation as the day progressed. For the first time since his divorce, Daniel allowed himself to imagine what it might be like to be part of something larger than just him and Emma. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying, but as he finally drifted off to sleep, he realized the thrill was winning. The week between the park meeting and their planned dinner crawled by with unusual slowness. Daniel found himself checking the calendar more often than necessary, while Emma marked off each day with the dedication of someone counting down to Christmas. By Thursday, she had already planned their outfit choices and insisted they needed to buy the perfect cake for dessert. Daniel stood in the bakery section of Morrison's grocery, watching Emma debate between chocolate and vanilla with the intensity of a Supreme Court justice. The irony wasn't lost on him that they were back in a grocery store, the scene of his first encounter with Rebecca and Tyler. "What if they don't like chocolate?" Emma asked, pressing her nose against the display case glass. "Everyone likes chocolate," Daniel assured her. "Tyler might be allergic. Then we'll eat it ourselves." Emma shot him a look that suggested this was not a satisfactory backup plan. "We could get both," she said hopefully. Daniel was about to explain the concept of reasonable portion sizes when his phone rang. Rebecca's name appeared on the screen, and he felt the small flutter of anticipation that had become familiar over the past week. "Hi," he answered, stepping away from the bakery counter. "Daniel, I'm so sorry, but I need to ask a huge favor." Rebecca's voice was strained, barely controlled. "I know we're supposed to have dinner tomorrow, but something's happened. At work, one of the other nurses had a family emergency, and they're asking me to cover her weekend shifts." I tried to say no, but "It's okay," Daniel interrupted. "These things happen." "No, it's not okay. Tyler's been looking forward to this all week, and I hate disappointing him." "But the money." Rebecca's voice trailed off, and Daniel could hear the exhaustion underneath her apology. Daniel understood the impossible position she was in. Extra shifts meant extra income, something a single parent couldn't afford to turn down, even when it meant sacrificing personal plans. "What if Emma and I picked up Tyler for the evening?" Daniel suggested. "We could still do dinner, just at our place instead. Tyler could sleep over if you're working overnight." There was silence on the other end of the line, and Daniel wondered if he'd overstepped Offering to take someone's child overnight was a significant responsibility, especially when they'd only known each other for a week. "I couldn't ask you to do that," Rebecca said finally. "You're not asking, I'm offering. Emma would love it, and honestly, it might be easier than trying to reschedule everything. Daniel, you barely know us. Taking care of Tyler overnight is something I do with Emma all the time," Daniel finished. "Adding one more kid to the mix isn't a big deal, trust me." Another pause, and Daniel could practically hear Rebecca weighing her options. He knew the feeling, the constant calculation between what you wanted to do and what you could afford. "To do. Are you absolutely sure?" she asked. "Completely sure. What time do you need to be at work?" 6 p.m., but Tyler has some medication he takes before bed, and he's particular about his pillow and— "Rebecca," Daniel said gently, "we'll figure it out. Just write down whatever I need to know." When Daniel relayed the change of plans to Emma, her reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. The prospect of Tyler sleeping over had transformed their simple dinner into an epic adventure requiring extensive preparation. "We need to set up the air mattress in my room," Emma announced, already mentally rearranging her space. "And we should plan activities in case he gets bored. Do you think he likes board games? What about movies? Should we make popcorn?" Daniel watched his daughter's excitement with amusement. Emma had inherited his tendency toward over-planning, but her version was fueled by pure joy rather than anxiety. Friday evening arrived with a knock on their door at 5:30. Daniel opened it to find Tyler standing on the porch with a small overnight bag, looking nervous but trying to hide it. Rebecca stood behind him, her work scrubs crisp and her expression apologetic. "Hi, Tyler," Daniel said. "Ready for your sleepover?" Tyler nodded, but Daniel noticed the way he stayed close to his mother's side. Despite his earlier enthusiasm, the reality of spending the night away from home was clearly causing some anxiety. "Mom packed my inhaler," Tyler said, patting his backpack, "and my allergy medicine, and she wrote down all the important phone numbers." Rebecca held out a folded piece of paper covered in her neat handwriting. "Emergency contacts, Tyler's medication, schedule, his bedtime routine, everything you might need." "I know it's a lot, but it's perfect," Daniel said, accepting the paper. "Very thorough." Emma appeared in the hallway behind Daniel, practically bouncing with excitement. "Tyler, I set up the air mattress and Dad said we could order Chinese food, and I found this really cool movie about kids who build a rocket ship." Tyler's nervous expression immediately brightened. "You have an air mattress. I've never slept on one before." "They're really bouncy," Emma informed him. "But Dad says we're not allowed to jump on it because it might pop." Rebecca knelt down to Tyler's level, straightening his shirt unnecessarily. "Be good, okay? Listen to Daniel and Emma, and call me if you need anything." "I will," Tyler promised. "Don't worry about me. I always worry about you. That's my job." Daniel watched this exchange with a familiar ache. He recognized Rebecca's struggle between wanting to protect Tyler and needing to trust others to care for him. It was the central tension of single parenthood, knowing you couldn't be everywhere and do everything, but feeling responsible for trying anyway. "He'll be fine," Daniel said quietly. "I have your number if anything comes up." Rebecca stood and looked between Daniel and the children, clearly fighting the urge to give Tyler another dozen reminders about behavior and safety. "Go," Daniel said with a smile. "Save some lives. We'll handle the home front." After Rebecca left, Daniel gave Tyler a brief tour of the house, while Emma provided running commentary on everything from the location of the bathroom to the optimal volume level for the television. Tyler seemed to relax as they settled into the living room with menus from 3 different restaurants. "What kind of Chinese food do you like?" Daniel asked. "I've never had Chinese food," Tyler admitted. Emma looked at him with the horror of someone who couldn't imagine such a deprived existence. "Never? Not even fried rice?" Tyler shook his head, looking slightly embarrassed by this gap in his culinary experience. "Then we're definitely ordering Chinese," Daniel decided. "It's time for your education to begin." They spent the next half hour selecting items that would provide Tyler with a comprehensive introduction to American Chinese cuisine. Emma appointed herself as Tyler's guide, explaining the difference between lo mein and chow mein with the authority of a seasoned expert. While they waited for the food to arrive, Tyler and Emma retreated to her room to inspect the sleeping arrangements. Daniel could hear them through the walls, Emma's voice explaining the finer points of pillow fort construction. Tyler's quieter responses growing more animated as his comfort level increased. The delivery arrived just as the children had finished, building what Emma declared to be the most sophisticated blanket fortress in the history of sleepovers. They ate dinner on the living room floor, the coffee table covered with white containers and small plates of sauce for dipping. Tyler approached each dish with the caution of a food critic, taking small bites and considering carefully before rendering. His verdict: the fried rice received immediate approval. The sweet and sour chicken required more deliberation, but ultimately passed the test. The egg rolls were declared interesting but good. "This is way better than the sandwiches we usually have for dinner," Tyler said, reaching for his third helping of fried rice. Daniel made a mental note not to mention this comment to Rebecca. He suspected she was already feeling guilty about working weekend shifts instead of cooking elaborate meals for Tyler. After dinner, they settled in to watch Emma's rocket ship movie. Tyler was fascinated by the technical aspects of the children's engineering project, asking detailed questions about propulsion and trajectory that impressed Daniel with their sophistication. "Do you want to be an engineer when you grow up?" Daniel asked during a pause in the action. "Maybe," Tyler said. "Or maybe a doctor like the ones my mom works with. She says they help people feel better, and that seems like a good job." "Your mum helps people feel better too," Emma pointed out. "Nurses are really important," Tyler smiled. "Yeah, she's pretty great at her job. Sometimes she comes home and tells me about the patients she helped that day. She makes it sound like she's a superhero or something." Daniel felt a warm appreciation for the way Rebecca had managed to frame her work as something heroic rather than simply necessary. It was the kind of thoughtful parenting that showed how much she understood about building Tyler's confidence and pride in their family. As the movie wound down, both children began showing signs of the crash that followed. An evening of excitement and sugar. Emma's eyelids were growing heavy, and Tyler was curled into the corner of the couch with the contentment of someone who felt completely safe. "Bedtime," Daniel announced, which prompted the expected protests and negotiations for just 5 more minutes. Getting 2 children ready for bed proved more complicated than Daniel had anticipated. Emma's normal routine expanded to include showing Tyler the proper way to brush teeth, the best techniques for face washing, and the importance of checking under the bed for monsters. A precaution Emma claimed to have outgrown but still practiced religiously. Tyler's medication routine was straightforward, a small white pill that he took without complaint, followed by a few puffs from his inhaler. Daniel watched carefully, wanting to make sure he could handle the process if Rebecca worked late shifts again. "Does your chest hurt?" Emma asked, watching Tyler use his inhaler with obvious concern. "Not really," Tyler explained. "I just have asthma, so sometimes it's hard to breathe. The medicine helps keep my lungs working right." Emma nodded seriously. "My friend Sophia has asthma. She carries her inhaler in a special backpack so she can use it during recess if she needs to." Daniel was struck by the ease with which children accepted each other's differences. Emma's matter-of-fact response to Tyler's medical needs contrasted sharply with the way adults often tiptoed around such topics. Getting both children settled in Emma's room required extensive negotiation about sleeping arrangements, nightlight, preferences, and the appropriate volume level for the white noise machine. Emma insisted was essential for proper sleep. Tyler seemed amazed by the elaborate bedtime setup, but Emma explained each element with the patience of someone sharing vital life skills. "The air mattress is really comfortable," Emma assured Tyler as they finally settled into their respective beds. "And if you need anything during the night, just wake up Dad. He's a really light sleeper." Daniel made a mental note to keep his bedroom door open, just in case Tyler needed reassurance during the night. The house felt different, with an extra child in it, more alive somehow, filled with the particular energy that came from children feeling secure and happy. He checked on them 20 minutes later to find both kids fast asleep. Emma was sprawled across her bed in her typical starfish position, while Tyler was curled on his side on the air mattress, one hand clutching the pillow he'd brought from home. Daniel stood in the doorway for a moment, struck by how natural the scene looked. Tyler fit into their household routine, as if he'd always been there, and Emma had risen to the role of hostess with grace and generosity. Downstairs, Daniel cleaned up the remains of their Chinese feast and tried to focus on the book he'd been attempting to read for weeks. But his mind kept drifting to Rebecca at the hospital, working through the night to provide for Tyler, and to the way Tyler had relaxed so completely in their home. Around midnight, his phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "How's everything going? Is Tyler behaving himself?" Daniel typed back. "Both kids are asleep. Tyler's great. Emma's already planning their next sleepover. Thank you so much for this. I know it's a lot to take on." "It's not a lot," Daniel replied honestly. "It's actually been really nice having him here." There was a pause before Rebecca's next message. "Tyler doesn't usually warm up to people this quickly. You and Emma must have made quite an impression." Daniel stared at his phone, wondering how to respond to that. The truth was that Tyler had made an impression on them too, but saying so felt like it carried more weight than a simple text message could handle. "He's a good kid," Daniel typed finally. "You should be proud. I am every day." Daniel set his phone aside and tried to return to his book, but sleep seemed increasingly unlikely. The house was too quiet after an evening filled with children's voices and laughter. He found himself hoping Rebecca's shifts would end early, not just for her sake, but because he was looking forward to hearing about Tyler's first sleepover experience. Around 2 a.m., he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Daniel looked up from his book to see Tyler standing in the living room doorway, his hair sticking up at odd angles, and his eyes still heavy with sleep. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked quietly. "I just wanted to make sure you were still here," Tyler said, sounding younger than his 12 years. "I'm still here." "Having trouble sleeping?" Tyler nodded and moved closer to the couch where Daniel was reading. "Sometimes I wake up and forget where I am." Daniel understood. New places could feel disorienting in the middle of the night, especially for a child who'd been through as many changes as Tyler had recently experienced. "Want to sit with me for a few minutes?" Daniel offered, moving over to make room on the couch. Tyler settled beside him, pulling his knees up to his chest. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the quiet hum of the refrigerator. "In the kitchen, Daniel," Tyler said finally. "Yeah? Do you think my mom is okay? At work, I mean." The question revealed the worry that Tyler had been carrying despite his excitement about the sleepover. Daniel recognized the feeling, the way children learn to monitor their parents' stress levels and take responsibility for emotions that weren't theirs to manage. "Your mom is very good at her job," Daniel said. "And she's surrounded by other people who are trained to handle emergencies. She's probably taking excellent care of someone who really needs her help right now." Tyler considered this. "She always says that helping people is worth being tired." "Your mom is a pretty amazing person," Daniel said. "She works really hard to take care of you and to help other people. That takes a lot of strength. I wish I could help her more," Tyler said quietly. "Like, help her not be so tired all the time." Daniel felt his chest tighten at the weight Tyler was carrying. No 12-year-old should feel responsible for their parents' exhaustion, but Daniel knew that single parents' children often develop this sense of premature responsibility. "You help her by being the person you are," Daniel said, "by doing well in school, by being kind to other people, by giving her something to be proud of. That's the best way to help your mom." Tyler leaned against Daniel's shoulder, a gesture of trust that surprised them both. "Emma's really lucky to have you as her dad." "I'm lucky to have her too," Daniel replied, "just like your mom is lucky to have you." They sat together until Tyler's breathing deepened and Daniel realized he'd fallen asleep against his shoulder. Rather than wake him, Daniel carefully adjusted their positions so Tyler could sleep more comfortably on the couch. He covered him with a throw blanket and settled into the armchair nearby, abandoning any pretense of reading. Watching Tyler sleep, Daniel found himself thinking about the conversation they'd just had, the boy's concern for his mother, his desire to ease her burden, his gratitude for simple kindness. These weren't the traits of a child who would steal candy on impulse. Tyler's shoplifting had been an act of desperation, not defiance, and understanding that context made Daniel appreciate even more how much strength both Rebecca and Tyler were showing in their daily lives. When Rebecca's text came at 6 a.m., "Shift, ending early, be there in an hour." Daniel was still awake in the armchair, watching Tyler sleep and thinking about how quickly strangers could become important to each other. Rebecca arrived at 7:15 with coffee and bagels, her hair escaping from a ponytail and her scrubs wrinkled from a night of non-stop activity. She found Daniel in the kitchen making pancakes, while Tyler and Emma set the table with the elaborate care of children who had appointed themselves official breakfast hosts. "Mom!" Tyler rushed to hug her, nearly knocking over a glass of orange juice in his enthusiasm. "We had Chinese food and watched a movie about rockets, and Emma taught me how to make the perfect pillow fort." Rebecca caught Daniel's eye over Tyler's head, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. "Sounds like you had quite an adventure." "It was the best sleepover ever," Emma announced with authority. "Tyler is excellent at building blanket fortresses. We should definitely do this again." Daniel noticed the way Rebecca's shoulders relaxed at the obvious success of the overnight arrangement. He'd seen that same relief in his own mirror during the early days of single parenthood, the constant worry that asking for help would somehow backfire or inconvenience people beyond forgiveness. "How was your night?" Daniel asked, sliding a plate of pancakes toward Rebecca. "Long," she admitted, settling into the chair Tyler had insisted she take. "But we saved someone's life, so it was worth it. A heart attack patient came in around midnight, and we managed to get him stabilized and transferred to cardiac surgery." Tyler looked up from his pancakes with obvious pride. "My mom is basically a superhero," he informed Emma. "She helps save people's lives." Emma nodded seriously. "That's way cooler than what my dad does. He just works with computers." "Hey," Daniel protested mildly, "computers are important too." "Not as important as saving lives," Emma replied, with the devastating honesty that children wielded without mercy. Rebecca laughed, and Daniel was struck by how different she looked when she wasn't carrying the weight of worry. Tired, yes, but lighter somehow. The laughter transformed her face completely. "What does your dad do with computers?" Tyler asked Emma. "He designs software for businesses," Emma explained, with the vague accuracy of a child who had heard the explanation multiple times without fully understanding it. "Something about making their computer systems work better." "That sounds complicated," Tyler said, clearly impressed despite Emma's dismissive assessment. "It can be," Daniel agreed, "but not as complicated as what your mom does. Medical emergencies require split-second decisions that can mean the difference between life and death. Software problems just mean someone's computer runs slowly, Rebecca smiled at him over her coffee cup. "You're being modest. I've seen what happens when hospital computer systems go down. Technology keeps the medical world running." The easy conversation over breakfast felt natural in a way that surprised Daniel. Rebecca fit into their morning routine as seamlessly as Tyler had adapted to their evening activities. Emma peppered both adults with questions about their respective jobs, while Tyler listened with the focused attention of someone cataloging information for future reference. "Can I come to your office sometime?" Tyler asked Daniel during a brief pause in Emma's interrogation. "I've never seen someone actually design software." "I'd like that too," Emma added. "You've never taken me to your office." Daniel realized with a start that Emma was right. In 3 years of single parenthood, he'd never brought her to his workplace. The office had remained a separate space, divorced from his role as father, maintained as a boundary between his professional and personal lives. "Maybe we could arrange a visit," Daniel said slowly. "If your mom doesn't mind." "Why would I mind?" Rebecca asked. "Tyler loves seeing how things work. He spent an entire afternoon last month watching construction workers repair the street outside our apartment." "Because I want to understand how they fix the pipes under the road," Tyler explained. "Everything connects to everything else. But most people don't think about it." Daniel was struck by Tyler's systematic way of thinking. The boy approached the world with the curiosity of someone who genuinely wanted to understand how systems functioned, rather than simply accepting that they did. After breakfast, Rebecca insisted on helping with cleanup, despite Daniel's protests. That she should go home and sleep. Tyler and Emma had disappeared upstairs to dismantle their blanket fortress, leaving the adults alone in the kitchen. "Thank you," Rebecca said quietly as she dried dishes. "Not just for watching Tyler, but for making him feel so welcome. He hasn't been this excited about anything since we moved here." "He's easy to have around," Daniel replied honestly. "Emma loves having someone to share her projects with, and Tyler asks really thoughtful questions about everything." Rebecca paused. In her dish drying, "Can I ask you something that might be too personal?" "Sure. Do you ever wonder if you're doing enough, as a parent, I mean, if you're giving your child everything they need, despite the circumstances?" Daniel recognized the question as one he'd asked himself countless times, usually at 3 a.m., when Emma was sick or upset about something he couldn't fix. "Every day," he admitted. "Emma deserves to have 2 parents who are present and engaged. Instead, she has one parent who's doing his best, but constantly worried it's not enough." "Tyler asks about his father sometimes," Rebecca said. "Not often, but when he does, I never know what to say. How do you explain to a child that one parent simply chose not to be involved?" Daniel had wrestled with a different but related problem. Sarah saw Emma regularly, but their relationship was complicated by her new family and her tendency to make promises she couldn't keep. "I think the best we can do is model the kind of relationship we want them to have with us," Daniel said. "Show them that being present and reliable matters more than being perfect." Rebecca leaned against the counter, studying his face. "You really believe that?" "I have to believe it. Otherwise, the guilt would be overwhelming." The conversation was interrupted by a crash from upstairs, followed by Emma's voice calling, "It's okay. Nothing important broke." Rebecca and Daniel exchanged the look that all parents shared when children announced that destruction had occurred but wasn't serious. "I should probably go rescue Tyler from whatever engineering project they've started," Rebecca said, but she didn't move toward the stairs. "Rebecca," Daniel said before he could talk himself out of it, "would you like to have dinner this week? Just the 2 of us, I mean. Emma could have another sleepover with Tyler, or we could arrange childcare, or—" "Yes," Rebecca interrupted, her answer coming so quickly that it surprised them both. Yes, I would like that very much." They stood in the sudden silence of the kitchen, both processing the shift that had just occurred. What had started as practical help and children's friendship was becoming something more deliberate, more intentional. "Wednesday," Daniel suggested. "There's a restaurant downtown that's supposed to be good. Nothing fancy, just—" "Wednesday is perfect," Rebecca said. "I'm off at 6, so any time after that works." The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced the return of Tyler and Emma, who appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking pleased with themselves. "We folded all the blankets," Emma announced, "and Tyler showed me how to make the air mattress go back in its bag without fighting with it." "It's all about the folding technique," Tyler explained seriously. "You have to get the air out systematically, not just squish it randomly." Daniel filed this information away as potentially useful for future sleepovers, a thought that indicated how naturally he'd begun assuming there would be future sleepovers. Rebecca gathered Tyler's belongings, while he and Emma made elaborate plans for their next meeting. Listening to their conversation, Daniel realized the children had already moved past thinking of each other as new friends and into the territory of assuming permanent availability for shared adventures. "Can Tyler come to my school play?" Emma asked as they prepared to leave. "It's next Friday and I'm playing with a tree in the forest scene." "You're playing with a tree?" Tyler asked with genuine interest. "Do you get to talk, or do you just stand there and look tree-like?" "I have one line," Emma said proudly. "I say the wind whispers secrets through my branches, and then I have to sway dramatically." Tyler nodded as if this was the most natural or theatrical choice in the world. "That sounds like an important tree. I'd like to see that." Rebecca looked to Daniel, clearly checking whether the invitation was genuine. "If it's okay with Daniel, I'd love to come." "It's more than okay," Daniel assured her. "Emma would be thrilled to have you both there." After Rebecca and Tyler left, Emma helped Daniel strip the sheets from the air mattress and restore her room to its normal configuration. But she worked with unusual quietness, and Daniel recognized the signs of serious thinking. "Everything okay?" He asked. "Do you think Rebecca is pretty?" Emma asked without preamble. Daniel paused in his sheet folding. "I think Rebecca is very pretty. Do you think she's nice?" "I think she's very nice too." Emma considered this information while smoothing wrinkles from her comforter. "Tyler said his mum doesn't have any friends here because she works too much and doesn't know anybody yet. That must be lonely for her." "It is. Tyler says she watches sad movies on her laptop after he goes to bed, and sometimes he hears her crying." Daniel felt his chest tighten at this information. The image of Rebecca alone in her apartment, dealing with exhaustion and isolation while trying to maintain strength for Tyler, was almost unbearable. "Maybe we can help her not be so lonely," Emma suggested, with the practical problem-solving approach she'd inherited from Daniel. "Maybe we can," Daniel agreed. "Are you going to ask her on a date?" The question caught Daniel off guard, both because of its directness and because Emma had clearly been building toward it through their entire conversation. "I already did," Daniel admitted. "We're going to dinner on Wednesday." Emma's face lit up with satisfaction. "Good. Tyler will be happy about that." "Why will Tyler be happy about it?" "Because he wants his mom to have someone to talk to besides him. He told me that yesterday. He said it's hard being the only person your mom has to rely on." Daniel was struck by the weight Tyler was carrying. Not just concern for his mother's happiness, but the burden of being her primary emotional support. No 12-year-old should feel responsible for their parents' social life, but single parents' children often develop this premature awareness of adult needs. "What about you?" Daniel asked. "How do you feel about me going on a date with Rebecca?" Emma shrugged with elaborate casualness. "I think it's good. You laugh more when she's around and you seem less worried about everything." "I seem less worried. You're always checking your phone to make sure there are no emergencies, and you get this line between your eyebrows when you're thinking about all the things you need to do. But when Rebecca and Tyler are here, you just pay attention to what's happening right now." Daniel was amazed by his daughter's perceptiveness. He hadn't realized his anxiety was so visible to her, or that Rebecca's presence had such a noticeable effect on his stress level. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of ordinary activities: grocery shopping, laundry, Emma's soccer practice. But Daniel found himself approaching these routine tasks with unusual lightness. The prospect of Wednesday's dinner created a pleasant anticipation that colored everything else. Monday brought a return to work schedules and school routines, but also text messages that punctuated the day with small connections. Rebecca sent updates about Tyler's excitement over the upcoming dinner date, while Tyler himself somehow convinced Rebecca to let him text Daniel directly about a science project he was working on. "We're studying renewable energy," Tyler's message read, "and I want to design a solar panel system for our apartment building. Do you think that's possible?" Daniel found himself genuinely engaged by Tyler's questions, spending his lunch break researching solar installation costs and energy efficiency calculations. Tyler's follow-up questions demonstrated the kind of systematic thinking that would serve him well in engineering or science, and Daniel discovered he enjoyed nurturing that curiosity. Tuesday evening, Daniel found himself standing in his closet with the kind of uncertainty he hadn't experienced since college. What did one wear to dinner with a single mother who worked night shifts at a hospital? Too formal would seem like he was trying too hard. Too casual might suggest he wasn't taking the evening seriously. Emma appeared in his doorway, clearly having appointed herself as fashion consultant. "The blue shirt," she announced after surveying his options. "The one that makes your eyes look really blue, and the jeans that actually fit right, not the saggy ones you wear on weekends." "When did you become an expert on men's fashion?" Daniel asked. "I pay attention to things," Emma replied with dignity. "Also, Rebecca will probably wear something nice because this is important to her, so you should wear something nice too." Daniel was touched by Emma's investment in the success of his date. She'd clearly given considerable thought to the evening's implications, approaching it with the same strategic planning she brought to school projects. Wednesday crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel found himself checking the time every few minutes, unable to concentrate on work. His colleagues noticed his distraction, and his assistant finally asked if everything was okay. "I have a date tonight," Daniel admitted, realizing he hadn't said those words in over 3 years. "About time," his assistant replied with satisfaction. "You've been working too much and socializing too little. It's not healthy," Daniel wondered. If everyone had been monitoring his social life and finding it inadequate, first Emma's observations about his stress levels, now workplace commentary on his isolation. Apparently, his need for companionship had been more obvious than he'd realized. He left work early to pick up Emma from school and drop her off at his sister's house for the evening. Emma had been excited about staying with her aunt and cousin, but she still felt the need to provide last-minute coaching as Daniel drove toward Rebecca's apartment. "Remember to ask her questions about herself," Emma instructed from the back seat. "And don't talk about work the whole time. And if she looks sad when she talks about Tyler's dad, change the subject to something happy." "Anything else?" Daniel asked, amused by her thoroughness. "Tell her she looks pretty, but not in a weird way, just like normal nice." Daniel pulled into his sister's driveway, wondering when his 9-year-old daughter had become more socially sophisticated than he was. Emma kissed him goodbye and reminded him to text her when he got home, so she'd know the date went well. Standing outside Rebecca's apartment building at exactly 7 p.m., Daniel felt the nervousness he'd been suppressing all day finally surface. This was the first real date he'd been on since his divorce, and the stakes felt higher than they should. Rebecca wasn't just someone he'd met casually. She was someone who might become important to both him and Emma, which made the evening feel weighted with potential consequences. He knocked on her door, and when Rebecca answered, Daniel understood immediately why Emma had insisted on the blue shirt. Rebecca wore a simple black dress that made her look elegant and confident, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked beautiful in a way that took his breath away. "Hi," she said, her smile bright but nervous. "Hi," Daniel replied, suddenly grateful for Emma's fashion advice. "You look incredible." "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." They stood for a moment in the doorway, both acknowledging the shift from friendship to something more intentional. This wasn't about helping with Tyler or arranging playdates for their children. This was about them, as adults, exploring the possibility of connection. "Ready?" Daniel asked, offering her his arm. "Ready," Rebecca confirmed, locking her apartment door behind her. As they walked toward his car, Daniel felt the same anticipation he'd experienced as a teenager preparing for his first real date. The evening stretched ahead of them, full of possibility and promise, and for the first time in years, he was optimistic about what might unfold. The restaurant Daniel had chosen was called Harvest Moon, a cozy bistro downtown with exposed brick walls and soft lighting that created an atmosphere of intimate warmth without feeling overly romantic. As they were seated at a corner table, Daniel appreciated that the space allowed for conversation without the pressure of an overly formal dining experience. Rebecca settled into her chair and looked around with obvious pleasure. "This is lovely. I haven't been to a restaurant that wasn't a hospital cafeteria in months." "The hospital cafeteria doesn't count as fine dining?" Daniel asked with mock surprise. "Unless you consider lukewarm coffee and sandwiches wrapped in plastic to be haute cuisine," Rebecca replied, her eyes sparkling with humor. "Though I have to admit their chocolate pudding is surprisingly good at 3 a.m. The waiter approached with menus and water glasses, giving them time to settle into the evening's rhythm. Daniel found himself studying Rebecca's face in the candlelight, noticing details he'd missed during their previous meetings. The small scar above her left eyebrow, the way she unconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. "Can I confess something?" Rebecca said after they'd ordered wine. "I almost cancelled this morning, twice." "Really? Why?" Rebecca considered her answer while toying with her water glass. "Because I haven't been on a date since Tyler was 4 years old. I'd forgotten how to be just Rebecca instead of Tyler's mom or Rebecca the nurse. The idea of conversation that doesn't revolve around my child or my patients felt almost foreign." Daniel understood that feeling intimately. Single parenthood had a way of subsuming identity until parent became the primary, sometimes only, definition of self. "What did you decide you wanted to talk about?" he asked. "Everything," Rebecca said with a laugh. "I realized I have 3 years' worth of conversations that aren't about bedtime routines or medical procedures stored up and waiting for the right person to share them with." Their wine arrived, and Daniel raised his glass. "To have conversations about everything, to conversations about everything," Rebecca echoed, touching her glass to his. The first sip of wine seemed to dissolve some of the nervous energy that had been crackling between them. Rebecca relaxed into her chair, and Daniel felt his own shoulders drop from the defensive position they'd unconsciously assumed. "Tell me about your work," Rebecca said. "Emma tried to explain it, but I think she got lost somewhere between software and systems." Daniel found himself describing his job with more enthusiasm than he'd felt in years. Rebecca asked intelligent questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than polite attention, and he realized how rarely anyone asked him about his professional life beyond the basic necessity of earning income. "So you're basically solving puzzles all day," Rebecca summarized after he'd explained a particularly complex project. "Taking systems that don't work well and figuring out how to make them efficient." "That's a much more interesting way to put it than database optimization," Daniel agreed. "What about nursing? What drew you to healthcare?" Rebecca's expression shifted, becoming more serious. My father had a heart attack when I was 16. I spent weeks in hospital waiting rooms, watching the nurses who took care of him. They were the ones who explained what was happening when the doctors were too busy, who sat with me when I was scared, who made sure my father felt human instead of just another patient. Did he recover? Completely. He's still complaining about his low-sodium diet 10 years later. Rebecca smiled at the memory, but watching those nurses taught me that healing isn't just about medical procedures. It's about treating people with dignity when they're at their most vulnerable. Daniel was struck by the thoughtfulness behind Rebecca's career choice. It wasn't just a job for her. It was a calling that aligned with her fundamental values about human compassion. Their appetizers arrived, providing a natural pause in the conversation. Daniel watched Rebecca taste her soup with the careful attention of someone who rarely had the luxury of eating slowly and appreciating flavors. "This is incredible," she said after the first spoonful. "I'd forgotten that food could taste like something other than fuel." "When's the last time you had a meal that you didn't eat standing up or between other activities?" Daniel asked. Rebecca considered the question seriously. "Probably Tyler's birthday dinner 3 months ago. We went to that pizza place with the arcade games, and I actually sat down for an entire hour." Daniel felt a familiar ache at the recognition of how much Rebecca sacrificed for Tyler's well-being. Single parents became experts at putting their own needs last, often forgetting they had needs at all. "What do you miss most?" he asked. "About life before becoming a single parent, I mean." "Reading," Rebecca said without hesitation. "I used to read everything, novels, biographies, medical journals that weren't required for work. I'd spend entire weekends lost in books. Now I'm lucky if I can finish a magazine article before falling asleep." "What kind of novels?" "Everything. Literary, fiction, mysteries, romance novels that I was slightly embarrassed to admit I loved. I had this fantasy of becoming one of those people who belonged to multiple book clubs and had intelligent discussions about themes and character development." Daniel smiled at the wistfulness in her voice. "What's stopping you from joining a book club now?" "Time, energy, the fact that most book clubs meet in the evenings when I'm either working or trying to help Tyler with homework or collapsing into bed." Rebecca shrugged. "Single parenthood requires a certain ruthlessness about priorities. Books are a luxury I can't afford right now." "What if the book club came to you?" Daniel suggested. "What if you found other parents in similar situations, who were also missing intellectual stimulation?" Rebecca looked at him with surprise. "You mean start my own book club?" "Why not? You can't be the only single parent in Burlington who misses having adult conversations about something other than work and children." "That's actually not a terrible idea," Rebecca said slowly. "I've met a few other single mothers through Tyler's school. We always talk about how isolated we feel, but none of us ever does anything about it." Daniel felt pleased to have suggested something that sparked genuine interest in Rebecca's eyes. He was learning that she was someone who thrived on connection and intellectual engagement, qualities that had been suppressed by the demands of single parenthood, but not eliminated. "What about you?" Rebecca asked. "What do you miss?" Daniel considered the question while cutting into his salmon. "Spontaneity," he said finally. "The ability to make plans without calculating childcare logistics, backup childcare, and emergency contacts. The freedom to say yes to invitations without wondering how it will affect Emma's schedule." "Do you regret having Emma so young?" Rebecca asked, then immediately looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, that's too personal." "No, it's not too personal. And no, I don't regret it. Emma is the best thing that ever happened to me, but I sometimes wonder who I might have become if I'd had more time to figure out my own identity before becoming responsible for shaping someone else's." Rebecca nodded with understanding. "Tyler was planned, but his father and I broke up when I was 6 months pregnant. I spent the last trimester trying to prepare for single parenthood while also grieving the future I'd thought we were building together. That must have been terrifying. It was, but also liberating in a strange way. I realized that I could either spend my energy being angry about what Tyler's father had chosen not to give us, or I could focus on building the best life possible with what we had. Daniel admired the way Rebecca had reframed her situation. It took enormous strength to choose optimism over bitterness when dealing with abandonment and betrayal. "Do you think Tyler misses having a father figure?" Daniel asked carefully. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, clearly choosing her words thoughtfully. "He asks questions sometimes about why some kids have dads who come to school events and coach Little League, and why his dad chose to move away. But mostly, I think he's adapted to our family being just the two of us. He seems like a remarkably well-adjusted kid." "He is. But lately I've been wondering if that's partly because he's learned to suppress needs that I can't meet, like his desire for male role models or his interest in activities that I don't understand well enough to encourage." Daniel recognized the concern in Rebecca's voice. Single parents constantly worried about the gaps in their children's experiences, the needs they couldn't fulfill despite their best efforts. "Tyler was asking me about software design," Daniel said. "He has this systematic way of thinking about problems that suggests he might be interested in engineering or computer science. Those aren't traditionally feminine fields, but they're not exclusively masculine either. Would you be willing to talk to him more about that?" Rebecca asked. "I mean, if he's genuinely interested. I don't want to impose, but Tyler lights up when he talks about building things and solving technical problems. I'd be happy to. Actually, I was thinking about arranging that office visit he asked about, if you're comfortable with it." Rebecca's smile was radiant. "He would love that. Thank you." Their main courses arrived and the conversation shifted to lighter topics: Emma's upcoming school play, Tyler's basketball tryouts, their mutual confusion about current music trends and social media platforms their children seemed to navigate effortlessly. "I feel like I'm constantly playing catch-up with technology," Rebecca confessed. "Tyler tries to explain things like TikTok and Snapchat to me, but I just smile and nod while secretly wondering if I'm becoming my parents." "Emma asked me to help her create a YouTube channel last month," Daniel said. "Apparently all her friends have them. I spent 2 hours trying to understand privacy settings and age restrictions before deciding I was not equipped for that particular parenting challenge." "What did you tell her?" "That we could revisit the idea when she turned 16. She was not pleased with this compromise." Rebecca laughed. "Tyler wants a gaming setup that costs more than my monthly rent. He's been saving his allowance for months, not understanding that saving money and affording something are two completely different concepts." Daniel appreciated how easily they'd fallen into sharing parenting experiences. These conversations felt different from the obligatory exchanges at school pickup or soccer practice, more honest, less performative. "Can I ask you something that might be awkward?" Rebecca said as they finished their entrees. "After this evening, I don't think anything could be awkward. What are your expectations for this? For us, I mean. Are you looking for someone to help with Emma, or companionship for yourself, or something more serious?" Daniel appreciated Rebecca's directness even as the question made him slightly uncomfortable. He'd been avoiding examining his own motivations too closely, but she deserved an honest answer. "I don't know," he admitted. 6 months ago, I would have said I wasn't ready for any kind of relationship. My divorce was difficult, and I convinced myself that Emma and I were better off alone. But meeting you and Tyler has made me realize how much I've been missing adult connection and emotional support. So, this is about companionship? It's about the possibility of partnership, Daniel said carefully. Someone who understands the challenges of single parenthood because they're facing the same ones. someone whose company I genuinely enjoy, whose child gets along with mine, who makes me remember that I'm more than just Emma's father." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I feel the same way. Tyler and I have been a complete unit for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to want to share experiences with another adult. But I also can't afford to make decisions based purely on what I want. Tyler has to be my first priority." "Of course he does, just like Emma has to be mine. So where does that leave us?" Daniel reached across the table and took Rebecca's hand, a gesture that felt both natural and significant. "I think it leaves us taking things slowly and seeing what develops. No pressure, no expectations beyond enjoying each other's company and seeing if this feeling of connection continues to grow." Rebecca turned her hand palm up, intertwining their fingers. "I can live with that uncertainty." They lingered over dessert and coffee, neither wanting the evening to end. The restaurant gradually emptied around them, but their conversation continued to flow with the ease of people who had been friends for years rather than weeks. "I should probably get home," Rebecca said finally, glancing at her watch. "Tyler's with my neighbor, and I promised to pick him up by 10. Daniel signaled for the check, but Rebecca insisted on splitting the cost despite his protests. "I may not make as much as you do," she said firmly, "but I pay my own way. That's important to me." Daniel respected her independence, even as he wished he could have provided the gesture. He was learning that Rebecca's pride was an essential part of who she was, not something to be overcome, but something to be honored. They walked slowly back to his car, the October evening crisp but comfortable. Daniel felt reluctant to end the evening, uncertain when they'd have another opportunity for uninterrupted conversation. "Thank you," Rebecca said as they reached her apartment building, "for dinner, for the conversation, for reminding me that I exist as more than just Tyler's mother." "Thank you for saying yes when you were nervous about it," Daniel replied, "for trusting me enough to share your concerns about Tyler, for being honest about your expectations." They stood facing each other in the soft glow of the streetlight, both aware that the evening was ending, but the relationship was just beginning. Daniel found himself wanting to kiss her, but uncertain whether that would be moving too fast. Rebecca seemed to sense his hesitation. She stepped closer and rose on her toes to kiss his cheek, a gesture that was affectionate without being presumptuous. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said softly. "I'll be waiting," Daniel replied. As he drove home, Daniel found himself smiling at nothing in particular. The evening had exceeded his expectations in every way. Rebecca was intelligent, thoughtful, and honest about her challenges and limitations. She was someone he could envision building something meaningful with, given time and patience. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "How was your date? Did you remember to tell her she looked pretty?" Daniel typed back, "Yes, I remembered. And it was wonderful. Good. Tyler and I have plans for your second date." Daniel laughed, realizing that his 9-year-old daughter and her 12-year-old friend were already more invested in this relationship than he'd fully acknowledged. The thought should have been concerning, but instead it felt like a blessing. Emma and Tyler's enthusiasm suggested that whatever was developing between him and Rebecca had the potential to create something larger than just two adults finding companionship. It could become a genuine family built on choice rather than obligation. The possibility was both thrilling and terrifying, but as Daniel pulled into his driveway, he realized he was ready to find out where it might lead. 6 weeks passed in a blur of carefully orchestrated family activities, stolen conversations between work shifts, and the gradual weaving together of two separate lives into something that resembled a cohesive whole. Daniel found himself measuring time differently now, not just by Emma's school schedule and his work deadlines, but by Rebecca's rotating hospital shifts and Tyler's basketball practice schedule. The four of them had fallen into a rhythm that felt natural despite its complexity, Tuesday evenings became homework sessions at Daniel's house, where Tyler and Emma spread their books across the dining room table while Rebecca and Daniel prepared dinner together. Saturday mornings were reserved for family activities, hiking trails when the weather cooperated, museum visits when it didn't, always followed by lunch at whatever restaurant could accommodate a table of 4 without requiring reservations. Daniel was surprised by how easily he'd adapted to considering 4 people's preferences instead of just 2. Emma had appointed herself as social coordinator, maintaining detailed mental notes about everyone's likes and dislikes, scheduling conflicts, and dietary restrictions that needed accommodation. Tyler can't have shellfish because of his allergies, Emma announced one Saturday morning as they debated lunch options. And Rebecca doesn't like spicy food because it gives her heartburn during night shifts. Dad likes Italian food, but not pasta with red sauce. I like everything except mushrooms and olives. Rebecca looked at Daniel with amusement. When did Emma become our personal assistant? She's always been a natural organizer, Daniel replied. I think she's enjoying having more people to organize. I like making sure everyone's happy, Emma said with the matter-of-fact tone she used for stating obvious truths. It's more fun when everyone gets what they want. Tyler nodded in agreement. Emma's really good at solving problems. She figured out how to rearrange our homework schedule so we both have time for basketball tryouts and piano practice. Daniel hadn't realized Emma was taking such an active role in Tyler's extracurricular planning, but it made sense. She'd inherited his tendency toward systematic thinking, and Tyler provided an appreciative audience for her organizational skills. The basketball tryouts Tyler had mentioned were scheduled for the following week. Tyler had been practicing obsessively, shooting hoops at the community center whenever Rebecca's schedule allowed for transportation. His dedication was impressive, but Daniel could see the anxiety building as the tryout date approached. You nervous about tryouts? Daniel asked during one of their Tuesday homework sessions. Tyler looked up from his math problems with the expression of someone who'd been caught hiding something. A little. Maybe a lot. What's the worst thing that could happen? I don't make the team. Everyone realizes I'm not as good as I thought I was, and I have to spend the winter with no activities while Emma gets to do all her cool theater stuff. Daniel recognized the catastrophic thinking that came with preteen anxiety. And what's the best thing that could happen? I make the team, get better at basketball, and have something to do that doesn't involve sitting around our apartment while Mom works. Those seem like the most likely outcomes are somewhere in between those extremes, Daniel pointed out. What if you don't make the team this year, but the coach gives you feedback about what to work on for next season? Tyler considered this possibility. That would be disappointing, but not terrible, I guess. And what if you make the team, but spend most of the season on the bench, learning from more experienced players? That would still be better than not making it at all. Daniel was pleased to see Tyler working through his anxiety, logically rather, than letting it spiral into panic. Want some company at tryouts? I could drive you if your mum's working. Tyler's face lit up with genuine surprise. You'd want to come watch? Of course I would. Emma and I could both come cheer you on. Mom has to work that afternoon, Tyler said. She was really upset about missing it. Then it's settled. We'll be your cheering section, and we'll video everything so your mom can see it later. Emma looked up from her spelling homework with obvious excitement. Can we make signs, like Go Tyler signs with glitter and markers? We can make the most elaborate signs in the history of basketball tryouts, Daniel promised. The enthusiasm in Tyler's expression made Daniel realize how much the boy had been craving this kind of support. Rebecca did her best to attend Tyler's activities when her schedule allowed, but single parenthood often meant missing important moments despite good intentions. That evening, after Tyler and Rebecca had gone home, Emma approached Daniel with the serious expression she wore when preparing to discuss important matters. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you going to marry Rebecca?" The question caught Daniel completely off guard. He'd been expecting inquiries about homework or weekend plans, not marriage proposals. "Why do you ask?" "Because Tyler asked me the same thing yesterday. He said his mom seems happier when she's with you, and he wants to know if that means we're all going to live together someday." Daniel sat down on the couch beside Emma, trying to gather his thoughts. 6 weeks wasn't nearly enough time to be thinking about marriage, but he couldn't deny that the relationship with Rebecca felt more serious and sustainable than anything he'd experienced since his divorce. "It's too early to know about marriage," Daniel said carefully. "Rebecca and I are still figuring out how we feel about each other." "But you like her a lot, right? Like more than just friends?" "I do like her a lot, and I think she likes me too." Emma nodded as if this confirmed her own observations. "Tyler thinks you should ask her to marry you soon because she needs help with things like fixing the sink in their apartment and reaching high shelves." Daniel laughed despite himself. "Marriage is about more than household maintenance, Em." "I know that. But Tyler says his mom tries to do everything by herself, even when it's too hard, and maybe she'd let someone help her if that person was her husband." The conversation revealed how much thought both children had been putting into their parents' relationship. Daniel realized that Emma and Tyler had been conducting their own analysis of the situation, reaching conclusions that reflected their desire for stability and expanded family support. "What would you think if Rebecca and Tyler became part of our family permanently?" Daniel asked. "I think it would be really good," Emma said without hesitation. "Our house feels more fun when they're here, and you smile more when Rebecca's around. Plus, Tyler's really good at helping with dishes, and he doesn't complain about vegetables like I do." Daniel was touched by Emma's practical assessment of the benefits. She'd clearly been observing how the family dynamic changed when Rebecca and Tyler were present, and her conclusion was unambiguously positive. "And you wouldn't mind sharing me with Tyler, or sharing your room when he sleeps over?" "Tyler's not taking you away from me," Emma said with the confidence of someone who'd already worked through this concern. "He's adding to our family, not replacing anything. And sharing my room is fun, because we stay up late talking about books and movies and stuff." Daniel realized that Emma had processed the emotional implications of blending families with more sophistication than many adults managed. Her secure attachment to him allowed her to welcome additional relationships without feeling threatened. The following week brought Tyler's basketball tryouts, along with an unexpected complication. Rebecca called Daniel on Tuesday morning with frustration evident in her voice. "The hospital is asking me to work a double shift on Thursday," she said, "which means I'll miss Tyler's tryouts completely. He's trying to act like it doesn't matter, but I can see how disappointed he is." "Emma and I are already planning to be there," Daniel reminded her. "Tyler won't be alone." "I know, and I'm grateful for that, but I should be the one cheering him on. I should be the parent who doesn't miss important events because of work obligations." Daniel heard the guilt and frustration that every single parent carried, the constant feeling of being stretched too thin, of missing moments that felt crucial to their child's development. "Rebecca, you're an incredible mother. Tyler knows how much you love him and support him. Missing one event because you're saving someone's life at the hospital doesn't make you inadequate. Logically, I know you're right. Emotionally, I feel like I'm failing him." "What if we made it special in a different way?" Daniel suggested. "What if we recorded everything and had a viewing party afterward? Emma could make popcorn, Tyler could provide commentary, and you could celebrate with him regardless of how the tryouts go." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "You'd really do that?" "Of course. Tyler's become important to both Emma and me. His successes feel like our successes too." "Daniel," Rebecca said softly, "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, unexpected and profound. Daniel felt his heart rate accelerate as he processed what Rebecca had just said. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," he replied, surprised by how right the words felt. "This is terrifying," Rebecca said with a shaky laugh. "Completely terrifying," Daniel agreed, "but also wonderful." Thursday evening arrived with unseasonably warm weather and high anxiety from Tyler, who'd been practicing his free throws obsessively since Monday. Daniel and Emma arrived at the school gymnasium with board signs decorated with enough glitter to be visible from space. "Go Tyler!" Emma's sign proclaimed in purple letters, surrounded by silver stars. Daniel's more conservative Tyler Chen Number 1 was rendered in blue and white, the school colors he'd looked up the night before. Tyler spotted them in the bleachers and waved with a grin that transformed his nervous expression into pure joy. Daniel felt a surge of paternal pride that surprised him with its intensity. When had Tyler's happiness become so important to his own emotional well-being? The tryouts consisted of various drills designed to assess basic skills, teamwork, and coachability. Tyler performed competently in most areas, excelling particularly in the defensive drills that required quick thinking and strategic positioning. Daniel found himself genuinely invested in Tyler's performance, filming everything while Emma provided enthusiastic commentary. "He's really good at stealing the ball," Emma observed, as Tyler intercepted a pass during a scrimmage drill. "And he's not selfish, like some of the other kids who just try to shoot all the time." Daniel agreed with Emma's assessment. Tyler played with intelligence and consideration for his teammates, qualities that coaches valued even when raw talent was still developing. When the tryouts concluded, Coach Martinez gathered all the participants to explain that results would be posted on Friday afternoon. Tyler jogged over to where Daniel and Emma were waiting, his face flushed with exertion, but glowing with satisfaction. "How do you think you did?" Daniel asked. "Better than I expected," Tyler said honestly. "I didn't mess up any of the drills, and Coach Martinez said I had good court awareness during the scrimmage." "That's excellent feedback," Daniel said. "Regardless of whether you make the team, you should be proud of how you performed." Emma presented Tyler with a bottle of water she'd been saving for him, along with a granola bar from her backpack. "You looked really professional out there," she said seriously, "like someone who definitely belongs on a basketball team." Tyler's smile at Emma's compliment was radiant. Daniel realized that the children's friendship had evolved into something that resembled sibling affection, supportive, loyal, and completely natural. They drove to Rebecca's apartment for the promised viewing party, stopping to pick up pizza and ice cream on the way. Rebecca greeted them at the door, still wearing her scrubs, having rushed home between patients to join the celebration. "Tell me everything," she demanded, pulling Tyler into a hug that lifted him off his feet. Tyler launched into a detailed account of every drill, while Daniel connected his phone to Rebecca's television to display the videos he'd recorded. They spent the next 2 hours analyzing Tyler's performance with the thoroughness of professional sports commentators. "You looked so confident," Rebecca said, watching Tyler navigate a defensive drill with obvious skill. "I'm so proud of how hard you've worked for this." "Daniel taught me some new strategies for positioning," Tyler said, "and Emma made me practice my introduction speech so I wouldn't sound nervous when I talked to the coach." Rebecca looked at Daniel with an expression that conveyed gratitude beyond what words could express. He realized that she was seeing her son supported by people who cared about his success purely because they cared about him, not because of obligation or blood relation. Friday afternoon brought the posting of team rosters. Daniel had offered to pick up Tyler from school and check the results together, sparing him the anxiety of waiting alone for Rebecca to finish her shift. They walked to the gymnasium in silence, Tyler's nervous energy palpable despite his attempts to appear casual. The roster was posted on the bulletin board outside the coach's office, surrounded by a cluster of 7th and 8th graders searching for their names. Daniel watched Tyler scan the list, his expression carefully neutral as he read through the names alphabetically. When Tyler reached the C's, his face suddenly broke into a grin of pure joy. "I made it," he said quietly, as if saying it too loudly might make it untrue. "I actually made the team." "Congratulations," Daniel said, pulling Tyler into a hug that felt completely natural. "I'm so proud of you." Tyler hugged him back with the fierce enthusiasm of someone sharing his happiness with people who genuinely cared about his success. "Wait until Emma sees this. She's going to want to make a celebration banner. She'll probably insist on throwing you a party," Daniel agreed, "with cake and everything." They called Rebecca from the car, putting the phone on speaker so Tyler could share his news. Rebecca's joyful scream was audible even before she spoke, and her rapid-fire questions about practice schedules and uniform requirements demonstrated her complete investment in Tyler's new adventure. "We have to celebrate," Rebecca declared. "Dinner somewhere special, just the 4 of us." "Can we go to that steakhouse downtown?" Tyler asked. "The one with the really good bread?" "We can go anywhere you want," Rebecca said. "This is your night." As they drove toward Emma's school for pickup, Daniel found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed in just 2 months. What had started as a simple intervention in a grocery store had evolved into something that felt like family. Not the family he'd been born into or even the one he'd created through marriage, but a family built on choice, mutual support, and genuine affection, Daniel. Tyler said quietly as they waited in the school pickup line. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think you and my mom might get married someday?" The question was delivered with the careful casualness that preteens used when asking about matters of enormous personal importance. Daniel recognized that his answer would matter deeply to Tyler, regardless of how it was phrased. "I think there's a good chance of that," Daniel said honestly. "Your mom and I haven't talked about it yet because we're still figuring out how we feel about each other. But I can tell you that I care about both of you very much, and I hope we'll all be a family." "Someday," Tyler nodded with satisfaction. "Good, because Emma and I have been planning what our rooms would look like if we all lived in the same house. And we've decided that you should definitely marry Mom because she needs someone to help her reach things on high shelves." Daniel laughed at the practical reasoning behind Tyler's endorsement. High shelf access is an important consideration in any marriage. "That's what we thought. Plus, Emma says you're happier when Mom's around, and Mom smiles more when you're there, so it seems like everyone wins." Emma emerged from the school building at that moment, her backpack bouncing as she ran toward the car with obvious excitement. Tyler rolled down his window to share his news before she'd even reached them. "I made the basketball team," he called out. Emma's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. She dropped her backpack and performed what appeared to be a victory dance in the middle of the pickup line, completely unconcerned about the other students and parents watching her celebration. "I knew you would," she shouted back. "We have to plan a party with decorations and music and a cake shaped like a basketball." Daniel watched his daughter's joyful response to Tyler's success and felt his chest tighten with emotion. Emma's happiness in Tyler's achievement was completely genuine, unmarked by jealousy or competition. She celebrated his victories as if they were her own because, in her mind, they were family victories. That evening, as the 4 of them sat around a table at Morrison's Steakhouse, Daniel found himself studying the faces of the people who had become most important to him. Rebecca looked radiant in a way that went beyond simple pride in Tyler's accomplishment. She looked like someone who'd found her place in the world. Tyler was glowing with confidence and achievement, but also with the security that came from being surrounded by people who genuinely cared about his happiness. Emma was already planning elaborate celebrations for future milestones, her natural leadership tendencies enhanced by having a larger family to organize and support. "I have something I want to say," Rebecca announced as they waited for dessert to arrive. "These past 2 months have been the happiest I've been since Tyler was born. Not just because of the help with practical things, though that's been wonderful, but because I remembered what it felt like to be part of something larger than just Tyler and me." She looked directly at Daniel as she continued. "I know we haven't talked about the future in specific terms, but I want you to know that I can't imagine going back to the way things were before we met you and Emma. You've become essential to our happiness." Daniel felt his heart racing as he recognized the significance of Rebecca's words. This was more than gratitude for practical help. This was a declaration of intent, an acknowledgement that what they'd built together was worth protecting and nurturing. "Rebecca," Daniel said, reaching across the table to take her hand, "I feel exactly the same way. These 2 months have shown me what I've been missing, not just companionship but partnership, someone who understands the challenges of parenting and shares the joy of watching our children thrive." Tyler and Emma exchanged a look that suggested they'd been anticipating this conversation. "Does this mean you're going to get married?" Emma asked with the directness that children used for addressing important matters. Daniel looked at Rebecca, realizing that their answer would determine the direction of all their lives. Rebecca squeezed his hand and nodded slightly, giving him permission to speak for both of them. "We haven't discussed the details yet," Daniel said carefully, "but yes, I think that's where this is heading." "When?" Tyler asked immediately. Rebecca laughed. "We literally just acknowledged that we want to spend our lives together. Give us a few minutes to process before we start planning a wedding." "But soon, right?" Emma pressed. "Because Tyler and I have already designed our rooms for when we all live together, and we've picked out what we want to wear to the wedding." Daniel was amazed by how thoroughly Emma and Tyler had been planning their parents' future, their investment in the relationships. Success went beyond simple desire for family expansion. They'd become active participants in creating the outcome they wanted. "Soon," Rebecca confirmed, looking at Daniel with an expression that conveyed both love and amazement at how quickly their lives had changed. "Definitely soon." As they left the restaurant that evening, Daniel felt the profound satisfaction that came from knowing he'd found his place in the world. What had started as a simple act of kindness in a grocery store had evolved into the foundation for a new kind of family, one built on choice rather than obligation, mutual support rather than dependence, and genuine affection rather than mere compatibility. Walking to the car with Rebecca's hand in his and listening to Emma and Tyler plan their shared future with enthusiasm and confidence, Daniel realized that sometimes the most important decisions weren't decisions at all. Sometimes the best things in life happened when you simply paid attention to opportunities for kindness and remained open to possibilities you'd never imagined. 6 months later, on a bright Saturday morning in May, Daniel and Rebecca stood in the garden behind Riverside Park, surrounded by a small group of family and friends, promising to love and support each other and the children who had brought them together. Emma served as maid of honor, while Tyler proudly stood as best man, both wearing the outfits they'd selected months earlier during that celebration dinner. As they exchanged rings and made their vows official, Daniel reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a 12-year-old boy stealing a candy bar and a 34-year-old man choosing compassion over judgment. It had grown through shared meals, homework sessions, basketball games, and countless conversations about the challenges and joys of raising children alone. Now, as Daniel kissed his new wife while their children cheered and their gathered loved ones applauded, he understood that the greatest adventures often began with the smallest acts of kindness. Sometimes helping a stranger in a grocery store wasn't just about solving an immediate problem. Sometimes it was about creating the foundation for a lifetime of love, partnership, and family. "Ready to go home?" Rebecca asked as they walked toward their car, rice and flower petals still clinging to their wedding clothes. "More than ready," Daniel replied, looking at Emma and Tyler racing ahead of them toward their shared future. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was these three people who had chosen to love him, who had trusted him with their happiness, who had transformed his life simply by allowing him to be part of theirs. And as they drove toward the house that would now shelter all four of them, Daniel knew that every challenge they'd face would be easier because they'd face it together. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.